Hello and welcome again to a new chapter of Azure Support Academy. In this new chapter, we are going to talk about the best practice at the moment to establish the connection or how to prevent issues running queries against Azure SQL Database. The agenda, we have 4 points in our agenda for today. One is we are going to talk about configurations. We are going to cover some topics that we need to be aware about to prevent connection issues. For example, configure the ports, configure the antivirus, etc. The second point will be prevention. Prevention means that how our application needs to be configured or how to be developed in order to establish the connection using retrial logic or some parameter in the connection string that that is very important when you establish the connection against Azure, SQL Azure. The third one will be executions. So we are going to talk about the command timeout or other parameter about connected write count, because it's very important to establish correct command timeout or try to handle all the errors that you could have in SQL Azure when you try to run what query. And finally, we are going to talk about how to monitor the connections that you have. My name is Jose Manuel Jurado. I am Support Escalation Engineer in SQL Azure, Subject Master in this technology, and speaker in some different events. But the first point that I would like to talk with you is how the connection works. The first point is you need to know that all connections we go through the port 1433, the protocol will be TCP and will be encrypted. So that is not possible to disencrypt the connections. So when you try to connect at the first time, when you try to connect to the SQL, all these connections will go directly to the proxy. This proxy it's a mix between hardware and software that protect your connection in terms of denial of services or verify the firewall rules that you have in the server. So we need to explain that that is not possible to connect directly to your server. So all the connections go through proxy. For this reason, all servers, when you run a ping command against your server, you or another server, both are located in, for example, in West Europe, North Europe, you are going to have the same IP. That means that you are going to connect through the proxy, not connect directly to the server. We have two possible connection methods that we have. One is Azure Active Directory. We need to remember that we are not able to use Windows credential, so you need to use the Azure Active Directory. So in this case, you need to update your application. If you are using .NET, you need to update the framework of 4.6 because you are going to use a new library. This library allows to connect to your on-prem Azure Active Directory or using Azure Directory Federation system to verify the connection with the user and password. And other mechanisms that we have is SQL login. So it's the normal login that we have with password and the user and password. As we explained, we have different language that we have a bunch of language, for example, Arrow, Java, PHP, Python. So you have multiple languages and multiple drivers to connect to the SQL. So we have two different mechanisms to connect to SQL Azure. One is when your application is running in Azure, inside of Azure, and when you run outside of Azure. So when you are connecting from, for example, from your office, from your home, etc. The first point is when you try to connect running inside Azure. The first point is you are going to use this connection string. You are going to specify the TCP protocol, your server, and your port. This connection goes through a proxy control ring, okay? Because the proxy control ring is our proxy that detects the verification, the firewall rules, etc. And the proxy, it's a redirection process because the proxy retransmit or sends some specific information to the client that the next time that you want to connect, you are going to connect directly to the tenant ring. That the tenant ring is the different server, the amount of server that you have when your database is running. For example, you have here your primary copy of your data, and you have here the different secondary data. Okay, so the proxy control ring verify the connections, review everything, and send this information to the client. The client will be connect directly to the tenant ring. That is not possible if you try to connect directly to the tenant ring. Will not possible because a proxy needs to send some information to these applications in order to establish what is the port, what is the different configuration that you need to work. This is an example about how the connections works. For example, this is my client. Try to connect. This is the client. Try to connect to the firewall of the proxy. The proxy retrieve the data. Okay, you need to connect right now to the tenant ring 31 North Europe worker database. This is the tenant ring. Another configuration is when you are working outside of Azure. If you, we have the same scenarios using TCP and port. We have the proxy control ring, but in this case, we have the direction is not occur, and all the connection go through the proxy. The proxy retrieve the data, try to connect with the primary of the data of the database that we have, server that we have in running the database, and send the information across through the proxy. So this is the connection when you run outside of Azure. This is another example about how the connections work. For example, this is my PC. Try to connect, and all the connections go always using our proxies. North Europe, if you run the use server being server name database.windows.net, you are going to receive most probably the name of the proxy. We need to explain that when you are working outside Azure, your client application will use just only one port, the port 1433. But when you are working with it inside of Azure, its connection will will use two ports. First, the port 1433, and second one will be the port that the proxy sent to the client application will be 11,000 of until 2000, something like this. So we are going to explain later about the different things that you need to be aware about these ports. If you want, in some specific situation, if you don't want that the connection will be used on second port, you could modify some parameters following these instructions that we have here and that we have here, in order that the connection always, even when you are running inside of Azure, your application, use the connection, use only the proxy. It's an example, but my recommendation is to use the redirection, try to connect directly to the tenant ring because the connection will be more faster. What is the best configuration, the best practice for the configuration of SQL Azure? Well, the first one is to have the DNS updated, because I have seen some customers that are using a local DNS or using ADC or host file, causing a connection problem because the IP that's wrong. So it's very important because we could change the IP without any notification to our customer or proxy. So please always use name of the server without adding IPs, because you could receive one error about you are not able to connect. The ports outbound, it's very important to know that when you're running outside of Azure, you need to have open 1433 and outbound. Okay, and when you are running inside of Azure, when you have the redirection process, all the port that the outbound port will be the number that you have here. It's very important to review the antivirus and Windows firewall that the port 1433 is not blocked at outbound. In some strange situations, let's say that some ESP provider close the ephemeral port. Ephemeral ports are when your application try to connect with a 1433. The client will be open and one port, for example, 40001, to connect to the SQL, not to connect to SQL if it's the local port and the connection is using 1433. This is a normal situation. That is not needed to be aware about this port, but in some specific provider, we have seen that this ephemeral port are not available from the client because it's blocked. So we need to review this situation. And finally, some issue that we have seen, it's about the IP of the Azure SQL proxy. It's blocked or changed. So for the reason, you need to open this connection of this IP, or try to use always the name, the resolution of the name, state the IP. Finally, we have to do more. When you are connecting from the Azure VM, you need to public IP, because the connection always we are going to use the proxy connection. So this is IP, public IP. So at the end, your virtual machine needs a public IP. Normally, there is no need to be aware, because normally when you create a VM, you are going to have an internal IP, external IP without any other consideration. And we have seen some other situation when you have a geo-replication enabled. Remember that if you create logins between two SQL servers and you establish the geo-replication between two databases of these different servers, the logins are located or are defined in the master database. So even when you create a user in your database, the user will be replicated correctly to the geo-replicated database, but the login has not been. So we need to create the login with the same seed to the new logical server, to the server that we have geo-replicated database. Preventions. Other best practice that we have about to prevent issues when the connection. The most important thing is to use the protocol TCP on the port 1433. Why we are using TCP? Because SQL Azure is just only using the protocol TCP. When you client, when the applications try to connect to the SQL, depending on some configuration, this application will retry different protocols that we have from SQL Azure, from SQL Server, for example, NetPipes, chat memory, etc. So in this case, we are going to save some time the connection, because we are specified just only the protocol TCP. Is another port, it's very important to use the port 1433, because at the end, we are going to use just only 1433. It's the default instance. We are not going to use named instance in SQL. So it's just only to speed up the connection when you are using SQL Azure. It's very important to establish the connection, the timeout of more than 30 or more than 30. With a strong recommendation is to use always the last version of .NET, Microsoft JDBC or ODBC. For example, ODBC version 13, you are going to be able to use the Azure Active Directory to connect using the Azure Active Directory. Other previous version of DBC, you are not able to use Azure Active Directory using ODBC. Our recommendation is to use contained user instead of logins because, and explained before in your application, your database will be more portable because when you create a user in your database, if you move the database for other servers, the security is inside on the database. There is no need to create logins in the master. So we are going to prevent to have orphaned logins. And also, if you are doing a lot of connection at the same time, there is no need to go to the master to validate when you establish the connection. There is no need to go to the master, obtain the login, verify the password. Just only the password and the user it's contained in the database. So you are saving some milliseconds, let's say, to validate the logins in the master. Connection pooling is very important. I don't know if you know what is connection pooling. Connection pooling, that means that you are going to reuse the connection. When you establish the first connection, will take some time, but the next connection will reuse this connection. So you are saving some milliseconds to establish the connection. It's very important to start the connection pooling. And finally, we are going. It's very important, at least, to disable multiple active result sets because it's time. It's time that when you open a connection and you have marks or multiple active result sets, we are going to have some internal connections because when you enable the multiple active result sets, SQL in this connection means that you are going to create some other connection in the same connection, let's say, or socket, to run 2 or 3 queries at the same time in different connection. If you're not going to use this one, my suggestion is to disable, because if not, you are for each query that you have or each connection that you have, you are going to have 2 or 3 connections more without any without any sense right now if you are not using the multiple active result sets. Other recommendation that we have to prevent problems in the connection is open and close the connection as fast as possible, because when as you know, when we have idle connections, after 30 minutes, we are going to close directly the connection. For this reason, our recommendation in SQL is open the connection, do something, and close as soon as possible. The connection might fail. Yes, it's normal because we could, as you know, it's time that you create one database. You are going to have 3 different copies of the data. So using always on, we are going to have 3 different machines running in a cluster environment, let's say, in always environment. So if we need to run some, we will have some failover process that the primary is moving to another server, or this failover occurs because we are doing some updates, security, and new improvements, etc. Or you could have some branching errors, so because at the end the connection will fail. So for this reason, the retry logic that we are going to explain later, it's very important to have in your application. Entity Framework and .NET 4.6.1 contains right now the method to, there is no need to implement anything, because these 2 technologies have right now, it's time that you connect and the retry logic is implemented in these two technologies, running the connection or establish the connection. As we explained, avoid the idle connections. And our other recommendation that we have is try to catch all the connections and common executions. So it's very important that have a very good handle error mechanisms, because suppose that you are running a command, you don't have any handle error, and the error occur, and the connection is open. So at the end, you have one connection that it's in idle state for one time, but the connection is open. So at the end, you are not able to reuse this connection. So my suggestion always is try to catch all the connection and all command execution. It's very important to have this in order to prevent that you are not able to connect. So it's very, very, very important. This is one example about the retry logic. We are going to explain later in an example, in a demo, but in this case, for example, this is a function in C#. This is the connection string that I send in this connection. This is the object in SQL connection. So what is the process? The process is very simple. We are going to try 5 times. For each time that I try the connection, if the connection is not established, we are going to wait some milliseconds. In the first will be 5. Sorry, 10 seconds. Yes, 10 seconds. If not, we are going to multiply by 1.5. So at the end will be 15, 20, 25, etc. So the intention is, if you are not able to connect, wait some time and establish again the connection. My suggestion is to have this timeout because it's very important. Don't try to connect after a few milliseconds, because in one failover process we have we could, at least in our measure that we have seen, normally the failover process will take no more than 1 minute. So if you try to leave this minute for a few milliseconds, retry the connection, at the end you are not going to connect. For the reason, establish this timeout, increasing this timeout, and the end you are going to connect successfully your database, because you have to wait some seconds. This is that when we have the problem, suppose that I try to connect, I catch the error. Okay, we have an error. For example, a database is not open. For example, when you have the maximum level of errors, or you don't have enough resources, or too many operations. So at the end, capturing this error, you are going to control the errors that you have, and you could retry time to time. We have add this number 18456, because this is an error that it's not needed to add in the error, because it's just only for login error. Okay, because I will like to just only for testing to pretend that the error is transient. Okay, so it's just only an example. So you need to remove this number and all this number. This is the normal process that you need to review. So when you start the connection, my suggestion for other solutions that I would like to share with you is try to clear all pools. So clear all pools means that if you have the connection and you have an error in your application, and you have some open connection, idle state, or some other problems, running this command, clear all pools, you are going to remove, or you are going to mark the connection pool, the items that you have in the connection pool in these states, run state, let's say. You are going to remove, and you are doing that this element will be available again to reuse by another connection. Other best practices about execution. So it's very important. Try to avoid to run the select star and just only return just the needed rows. Because we have seen, remember that when you run the select star, you're going to retrieve all the data that you have and the connection. It's very important to have a very good bandwidth and etc. But just only return just the needed rows and avoid the star. Just only specify the fields that you want to receive. The execution timeout again, and it's very important that if you think that this query takes more time, try to specify the execution time accordingly with this execution. Distributed transaction. In SQL Azure, we don't have right now implemented the distribution transactions. So when you have two servers, two databases, different servers, and you want to run one update in both databases, you have the option in your code using transaction scope to establish these distributed transactions. So we are going to show in another chapter how to use the distributed transactions. Other thing is cross queries. So as you know, SQL Azure is not able to retrieve data from another database when you establish the connection. If you need to connect or to retrieve data, as we have in SQL Server and SQL Server Core, for data from another database, the most important thing, or the thing that you need to know, is to use a cross-database query or using the external data. One example that we have seen is when you need to run some specific queries, the table that you want to connect of another database, it's large. And my suggestion is to use the sp_execute remote, because the connection will execute it in the server, in another server, and just only the server that you want to retrieve the data will transfer to do connections, just only the rows and the information needed. Finally, as you know, SQL Azure is just only using UTC. So you need to use, we have in our blog one specific workaround to use at time zone. And the language, in terms of error message, you could change. We have another article in our blog to change the language in terms of error message. And explained before, it's very important avoid long batch. So my suggestion is always try to use short batches in order to don't have problems with transaction log or 10DB, and to have a very good maintenance plan. At the end, my suggestion is to create a maintenance plan to rebuild indexes and update the statistics in order to the execution plan of the queries will be the best execution query and avoid the fragmentation of the indexes. In our blog, you could see all these workarounds, all these options in order to implement in SQL Azure. I would like to add in this presentation about how to capture and time out. Okay, this is an extended event that we are able to use in SQL Azure to capture and command time out in SQL Azure. So the last part is using the monitoring the connection. So we have several things. For example, as support engineers, we have intertelemetry data that we are able to see, or we are able to detect different problems, or each time that you connect, we have this information about when the connection is established, and the server and some part of the IP. Just only we have this information. Other things that you could implement by yourself is SQL auditing. It's more or less we could say the SQL auditing is more SQL profiler. So using SQL auditing, you have the when the connection is established, the query that you're executing. So it's very important if you want to have this information in SQL auditing. We are going to show you another example in the next slide about how to obtain the statistics about the connection using the stopwatch. And finally, if you want to run some query, if you run some queries, we have the query data store enabled by default, or query performance inside that you will be able to know for each execution the time spent for each execution, if you need missing indexes, etc. So query data store and query performance inside is very important for us. This is an example I have for monitoring the connection. For example, in this case, it's a C#. We run the select top. We call this retrieve statistics. We enable here the statistics. And when you run this command field, for example, after this select top, you're going to have some data that is very important to know. For example, you could receive the bytes received, select count, execution time, or the connection time. So you could implement in your code one this time execution. And in our chapter 11, we have a PowerShell command that you could review the connection time, the elapsed time for everything that you have. Okay, so we are going to show you an example about the retry logic. Okay, I create this application using C#. I have several examples about the connection, use Azure Active Directory, connection pooling, monitor, retry logic. But I would like to remark about the implementation of retry logic. So we are going to call this function. We are going to use bad connections, okay? So because my intention is just only for demo purpose, make an error or try to provoke an error in the connections. We're going to run this query, this program. Okay, we call, we are calling right now the connection. So this is the my connection string with a wrong password. We have 3 times. Okay, we establish the connection using this connection string. We try to open the connection, and the connection is failed. So we capture the error. The error number is 18456. That means that's a login error. It's for demo. Please remove when you have this, remove this because it's an error. We have the error connectivity right now, create the pools, counter, and if the connection is it's tried is number 1, it's more than 1. We are going to wait right now 10 seconds per multiplied by 1000. So we are going to wait 10 seconds. And after this time, we are going to try to connect again. But the next time that we are going will be 15. So it's increasing in 5 seconds each time. So it's very important. So this retry logic, because during 1 minute you will be not able to connect to the SQL for any transient issues in SQL Azure. So okay, I think that it's not because this presentation takes more time. But again, if you need more information or you have any question, please send an email to jmjurado@microsoft.com. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you in another session. Thank you so much. Bye.